PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we're going to be continuing our series of our NHL season preview. As a few episodes ago, we did our preview of the Eastern Conference. And then the next day, we did a preview on the Western Conference. Now is the third and final part of this series, as we're going to be breaking down on Vegas Hockey Hub and making our official prediction on who our 2025 Stanley Cup winner will be. We are making our prediction for the 2025 Stanley Cup here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Similar to what we did in 2024 and similar to what we did in 2023, we are going to be making our prediction before the season kicks off. And then at the end of the year, we are going to then take a look back at it and see how we did with our predictions. Now, go to www.prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. We have over a dozen shows on the platform, including Vegas Hockey Hub. So I highly recommend going out and checking out all the amazing content we have on our network. We also have our social media pages at Vegas Hockey Hub. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are on all major platforms at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow your host, my link is right down there at Ian J. Kelly. Now, so we're going to start this out by going through the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, we're going to be breaking this down and using the bracket that we figured out and explained in our two-part before. So, the teams that we have making the playoffs in our first two parts, they are going to be used here. So, we're going to start out with the Eastern Conference. We're going to break all of that down, and then we will move over to the Western Conference, break it down, and then finally, we will get to our Stanley Cup final prediction here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So, starting this out with our Stanley Cup prediction, we're going to have the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on their wild card opponent in the Ottawa Senators. And this is going to be a real interesting back and forth between Toronto and Ottawa, because this is going to be not only a Canadian series, which we have seen over the past decade has been some of the most physical and demanding series in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but more importantly, you have an Ottawa Senators team who has not made the playoffs in years. You have to go back to the Mark Stone era of the Ottawa Senators to the last time that they were relevant. You have to go back to when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and got bounced by the Pittsburgh Penguins and were just one game away from making it back to the Stanley Cup Finals for the second time in franchise history. It's been that long ago. So for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are going to be the best record in the Atlantic Division, going up against the second wild card in the Eastern Conference, which will be the Ottawa Senators. This is going to be a good back and forth battle, but I see this being a 5-game series between the two, and you will have the Toronto Maple Leafs moving on, and they're going to win this series in 5 games. Now, a series that is not going to be a 5-game series and most likely could be a 7-game series is the 2 versus 3 seed in the Atlantic Division. And of course, we are talking about the Boston Bruins taking on the reigning, defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. And this could be the best series in round 1 of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. I have no doubt in my mind that Boston versus Florida, considering the amount of times they have faced off in the playoffs the past couple of seasons, remembering how Florida pretty much ruined the President's Trophy season, the momentous season that they had 2 years prior, that was ruined by Florida. And then this past season, when Boston beat Toronto in the first round, who did they end up losing to? That's right, it was them. So, when it comes to this matchup in the first round, 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, this is going to be a Boston Bruins team that's going to want to end their drought of losing to Florida in the playoffs like they have the past 2 seasons. And then you have a Florida Panthers team that's going to try to win a Stanley Cup and try to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals for the 3rd time in a row. However, in this 7-game series, it is going to be a back and forth battle. You're going to have 2 teams that are going to put everything they have on the line. They're going to put their bodies on the line between Boston and Florida. But when we study the roster side by side, Florida has an advantage in the goaltending department. The defense, this is kind of more of an even situation. So in terms of the scoring and on offense, the Boston Bruins are going to have the advantage there. So in 7 games, I will be predicting that joining the Toronto Maple Leafs in the second round of the playoffs, you're going to have the Boston Bruins finally, for the first time in years, beating Florida in the first round. So those are your 2 matchups in the Atlantic Division. Moving over to the Metro, you're going to have a situation where the number 1 team in the Metro will be going up against the first wild card. And of course, we are going to be talking about the New Jersey Devils and the Detroit Red Wings. To feel like this is kind of an old school situation, like back in the day, the Devils and the Red Wings who dominated in the 90s and early 2000s, but they're going to be meeting in the first round of the playoffs, and it's going to be between these 2 teams here, New Jersey and Detroit. Detroit Red Wings were just a smidge away from making the playoffs last year. I've liked the moves they've made in the offseason. They are good enough to be a first wild card in the Eastern Conference. New Jersey has made a lot of great moves and a lot of moves in the right direction to be the best team in the Metro, hence why they are here when it comes to our Stanley Cup prediction. So when it comes to New Jersey and it comes to Detroit, this is going to be a matchup where Detroit, first time in years, they're in the playoffs. New Jersey making it back to the playoffs after missing it the year prior. And basing off of strength and weakness between New Jersey and Detroit, I can see this being a 5-game, 6-game matchup, but New Jersey will move on and they will go to the second round. They will beat Detroit in the first round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. Going to be a good series, something that we're looking forward to, but Detroit's playoff window will end at the first round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. And I spoke to earlier in this show how you have 2 teams in Boston and Florida who have been meeting in the Stanley Cup playoffs over the last couple of seasons. Well, these 2 teams have been meeting very often over the past couple of years. They are not going to be a surprise at all. You have the New York Rangers taking on the Carolina Hurricanes. And in terms of first-round matchups, this is going to be very intriguing. New York Rangers, their core roster is among the best in the NHL. They have a bunch of young guys alongside their veterans that are going to be helping out this team. However, this is going to be a series where goaltending is key. And to make a statement that Igor Shesterkin is the best goalie between 2, Freddie Anderson, he's solid, don't get me wrong, but Igor Shesterkin is going to be the best in this series. The goaltending is going to win out here. So in a 6-game series, the New York Rangers beat Carolina and they move on to the second round of the Eastern Conference. Now, getting into that second round of the Eastern Conference as we're doing our 2025 Stanley Cup playoff prediction here on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Rickelli. We have one of the oldest rivalries in the NHL. 2 teams that always find a way to meet each other in the playoffs. And in the second round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, we are predicting that it's going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins. And not only, I'm going to call it now, not only is this going to be the best series in round 2, but in terms of action, in terms of drama, in terms of intrigue, there is no series that's going to be more hyped than Toronto and Boston. Not just the history between Toronto and Boston. We already know what the history is. But based on the fact that can Toronto finally get past Boston? For the first time in decades, in what feels like a century to Toronto Maple Leafs fans, can they finally beat Boston? That's going to be the question that so many people are going to want to know if they meet in the second round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to be a 7-game series. It's going to be a bloodbath. There's going to be scrums and brawls and fights. There's going to be physicality galore. However, in this 7-game series, I have to wonder what roster is better. What team has more strength than they do weaknesses? And because of Jeremy Swayman, because of the uncertainty that we have with the Boston Bruins in terms of goaltending, do I really trust Giannis Korpisalo to get them past the first round? All right. Does the roster itself end up Boston and getting this, and vice versa? How does the Toronto Maple Leafs find a way to get past Boston? Well, their offseason acquisitions are going to be a big reason as to why, helping out that team with Chris Tanev, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. This is a Toronto Maple Leafs team that has beefed up the defense and has made it not just the Morgan Riley and 5 other guys. So, because of all of that, in a 7-game series, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs moving on, and for the first time in forever, beating the Boston Bruins and advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since 2002. And then on the opposite side of that bracket, we have the Metro, and you are going to have a rivalry. You're going to have two teams that straight up don't like each other. And of course, I am talking about the New Jersey Devils and the New York Rangers. This is going to be a battle that is going to be a very intense series. This is going to be a great back and forth situation. But similar to what I said in the beginning in the first round, when I talked about the Rangers taking on the Hurricanes, goaltending is going to be the main fight here. And I like Jacob Markstrom. He is a heck of an upgrade for New Jersey compared to what they've had in previous years. But who would you trust in the Eastern Conference playoffs? Who are you going to trust come Stanley Cup playoff time? Igor Shesterkin or Jacob Markstrom? My money, if I had to place a bet, would be on the New York Rangers, New Jersey Devils. It would be for Igor Shesterkin to help them get past New Jersey. 6-game series, the New York Rangers, they do what they have to do. Artemi Panarin, Chris Kreider, Capo Caco, and all of these great players the New York Rangers have, like Braden Schneider, K'Andre Miller, Adam Fox on the defensive end. And the New York Rangers will advance to the Eastern Conference Finals in this 2025 Stanley Cup playoff prediction that we're doing here. And then finally, with the Eastern Conference Finals, we are going to have a scenario where the Toronto Maple Leafs are taking on the New York Rangers, okay? You're going to have a situation where 2 of the original 6 teams in hockey are going to be meeting in the Eastern Conference Finals. And like I said, the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, they're going to be coming out of the Atlantic. This is a team that has upgraded itself. They have gotten much better in terms of depth over this offseason, and their roster is more well-rounded than it has been in previous years. And then on the opposite side, when you have the New York Rangers organization, in Igor we trust, he is going to be their X factor in the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is going to be a 7-game series. This is going to be close. It's going to be intense. But the team I have coming out of the Eastern Conference for 2025 for the first time in nearly 30 years, I am going to be picking the Toronto Maple Leafs to make it to Stanley Cup Finals. They will be your Eastern Conference champions in 2025. So that is your Eastern Conference bracket for the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, if you agree, if you disagree, if you have questions, if you have comments, put it down below. I will answer and look at every single one of them. Now, moving over to the Western Conference matchup, because this is going to be a very interesting situation, because you have a Western Conference with a lot of moving parts, okay? This is going to be a team and bunch of matchups where you're going to see maybe some upsets, maybe you'll see some teams that are unexpected. However, this is going to be an organization. This is going to be really a series that you are going to go see two teams that are going to really be coming out of the Central, and then maybe one or two top teams coming out of the Pacific. And it's going to be an interesting scenario for the Western Conference. Now, let's get into that side and let's break down the Central for the first round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, as you are going to have the number 1 seed Dallas Stars, the top team in the Central, an organization that has one of the best cores in all of hockey. In terms of lineups, they are top 9 strong, and their defense is among one of the best in terms of depth in the NHL. And on the other side, you are going to have an LA Kings team that is going to be around the wild card level, a Los Angeles Kings organization that's going to be trying as hard as they can to make a playoff run and continue in the hunt. We have the Rob Blake era. You have a new coach and everything going on there. So interesting to see what happens with the Los Angeles Kings organization. And then on the opposite side with the Dallas Stars and with Pete DeBoer. Now, this is going to be a 5-game series. I think Dallas will win this one easily. Maybe LA gets a game off, but I see Dallas moving on, and they will go to the second round of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. And then on the opposite side of the Central bracket, you are going to have a Colorado Avalanche team that has been here. They've done that. They won a Stanley Cup a couple of years ago. You have majority of your core roster. You have a bunch of players who are still in their prime. And then you're going to have the Utah Hockey Club in their first season since moving over from Arizona. Clayton Keller, your team captain. And you're going to have a situation where the Utah Hockey Club, you're happy to be part of the show. And unfortunately, you're not going to be like Seattle 2 years ago, who had an insane upset and beat Colorado in the first round. This is more of welcome to the show. Welcome back to the playoffs. The last time Arizona made it was during the bubble in 2020. But in a 6-game series, the Colorado Avalanche, strength in numbers, Alexander Gorgiev, he is a reliable goaltender. Your defense led by Devin Taves and with Cale Makar. And then you have your 3-headed monster in terms of forwards, and that's going to help out the Colorado Avalanche plenty. So in a 6-game series, Colorado will win this matchup. Now, moving over to the Pacific Division, and this one's going to get me a lot of trouble. This one's going to get me plenty heated, but you have the President's Trophy winner, Vancouver Canucks, taking on the wild card Vegas Golden Knights. A matchup that maybe could have happened last year if Vegas and Nashville would have swapped places in the wild card race. But you have the Vegas Golden Knights. They've had a lot of moving parts. There's going to be some players that are moving around, and an organization that's preying on a goaltender to stay fully healthy all year long. Vancouver, Thatcher Demko, there is some health concerns around there, but the defense is locked down tight. Quinn Hughes, arguably a top 2 defenseman in the NHL. On forwards, your top 9 is, I would say, the best or second best in the NHL in terms of depth. So, between Vancouver and between Vegas, this is going to be a 7-game series. Vancouver and Vegas, and as much as I want to be a homer, as much as I want to be biased, and I want to say that your Vegas Golden Knights are going to go all the way, they're going to beat this team, they're going to move on to second round, they're going to move to the Western Conference Finals. Stop. Being realistic here on Vegas Hockey Hub, your Vegas Golden Knights, second wildcard team in the NHL Western Conference, they will lose in 7 games to the Vancouver Canucks. And for the second year in a row, your Vegas Golden Knights will be done by the beginning of May. As much as I want to be a homer and I want to be a fan here, looking at the roster, this is the makeup of what we see so far. This is what the roster is really going to be telling you heading into this season. So, unless something crazy happens over the next 7 months, unless there is something so drastic that changes everything, my prediction for the preseason is that your Vegas Golden Knights lose in 7 games to the Vancouver Canucks in the first round. And then in the first round, the number 2 and number 3 side for the Pacific Division, you will have the Edmonton Oilers organization, the team that made it to the Stanley Cup final, and we're just 1 game away, taking on the Seattle Kraken. Their young core, they have a strength in terms of defense and in terms of goaltending. They do have a at least decent battery ram and 2 good solid goaltenders out there in Seattle. They're doable. They can get the job done in terms of goaltending. Now, when it comes to Edmonton and Seattle, this is going to be a situation where Seattle could pull what they did 2 years ago and upset a better team like they did in Colorado back in 2023. However, being realistic here, I have the Edmonton Oilers beating Seattle in 6 games. Very similar to how they beat up on LA really the last 2 or 3 years. Seattle, you're going to be a first-round exit. You're going to be good that you're back in the playoffs. Congratulations. But unfortunately, Seattle, this is going to be a one-and-done. Just like Utah, it's going to be a one-and-done. And you're going to see a Edmonton Oilers team making it to the second round, and they're going to take on Vancouver. And then Dallas and Colorado, you're going to be meeting up in the second round on the Central side. And speaking of that, when it comes to the Central side, Dallas and Colorado, this is going to be a really good series. If Boston and Toronto were not over on the Eastern Conference, this would arguably be the best series in round 2. Dallas and Colorado should be a 7-game series. I think Georgiev going up against Jake Ottinger is going to be a one heck of a goaltending series. Defensively, I like the matchup and kind of the linings that you have between Colorado and Dallas. But the forwards is where I give the edge to the team that's going to win this. The amount of depth and the amount of goal scorers that this team has is the reason why I have the Dallas Stars winning in 7 games. This is going to be a Dallas Stars team that is going to be bruised. They're going to be beaten up. I have no doubt about it. But they are going to move on to the Western Conference Finals, and they are going to take on the winner of the Pacific Division by beating Colorado due to strength in numbers and with depth. Their top 9 is more explosive, and more importantly, they're going to generate more points than Colorado's top 9 will be. And then over on the Pacific side of the round 2 of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs, you have the Vancouver Canucks taking on the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, there's going to be another edition of Canadian playoff hockey. All right. We had Ottawa and Toronto in round 1. Then you have Vancouver and Edmonton in round 2. And this is going to be a series where I could see the Edmonton Oilers doing what they did this past season. This could very well be a rerun of what we just saw a few months prior. And as a matter of fact, when you have Connor McDavid, you have Leon Draisaitl, you have Zach Hyman, this is going to be a very interesting scenario for Edmonton. And when it comes to the second round, I have the President's Trophy winner not even making it to the Western Conference Final, as I have the Edmonton Oilers beating Vancouver in 6 games, and they will be moving on to the Western Conference Finals. So, this is going to be your Western Conference Final. You are going to have the Dallas Stars coming out of the Central and the Edmonton Oilers coming out of the Pacific. And as much as I just want to say that we hit rewind and we see what happened last time, I'm not going to be that subtle about it. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to change it up real quick, and I'm going to say that it's not going to be a repeat. It's not going to be a rewind, as we're going to see a Dallas Stars team in 7 games beat the Edmonton Oilers. For the first time since 2020, the Dallas Stars are going to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Jake Ottinger, that organization, Wyatt Johnston, Jason Robertson. This is going to be a Dallas Stars organization that, led by Pete DeBoer, they are going to beat Edmonton in 7 games in the Western Conference Finals, and you are going to have a Dallas Stars organization making it out of the Western Conference. So, your 2025 Stanley Cup Final. Coming out of the Western Conference, out of the Central, we have the Dallas Stars organization. You have an elite goaltender in Jake Ottinger. You have 3 solid defensive pairings out there led by Miro. And then you have a top 9, which is going to be great for depth out there in Dallas. And then on the Eastern Conference side, for the first time since the 90s, you have the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is going to be a Toronto team that you have an explosive goal scorer in Austin Matthews, top 5 player in the league. You have Nylander, you have Marner, who are your explosive 1B/2A players out there in Toronto. And then you have your depth pieces, Matthew Knies, a good up-and-coming guy you could have on your top 6. And you also have on defense, Morgan Riley, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. You have Chris Tanev. This is going to be a team that's going to have a lot of depth on defense. Simeon Benoit is going to be on there as well. And then when it comes to Toronto, having a Stanley Cup champion as your head coach and Craig Berube, this is going to be a new look and a change for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they make it out of the Eastern Conference. And then on the Western Conference side, Pete DeBoer for the Dallas Stars. And my prediction here on Vegas Hockey Hub, my 2025 Stanley Cup playoff prediction. And I want to give a shout out to Classic Communications, by the way, for supporting PR Connections Radio. We appreciate you. And now, my pick in 6 games to win the Stanley Cup Final. Drum roll, please. The Dallas Stars organization. For the first time in nearly 20 years, the Dallas Stars are going to pull this off. They are going to win the 2025 Stanley Cup Finals. And your Stanley Cup champion for the year 2025, I'm predicting right here, right now, is that the Dallas Stars are going to be your Stanley Cup champion. Now, am I going to be right? Hopefully. Am I going to be wrong on certain things? Absolutely. That's how predictions work. Now, this is what we did here on Vegas Hockey Hub. This is our prediction show. 3rd year in a row that we're doing this before the season kicks off. And like we did last year, when the season ends, we're going to look back on this and we're going to see how many we got right, which ones we got wrong, and laugh at ourselves on the way. So this was our 2025 Stanley Cup prediction show here on Vegas Hockey Hub. We have the Dallas Stars winning the 2025 Stanley Cup Finals. If you agree, comment down below. If you disagree, hey, like and share. Do whatever you want to do. Now, this is Vegas Hockey Hub, and until next time, continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey and go Knights, go.